Good evening, everyone. Today is October 28th, and this is the last Okada Toshio seminar this month. So, how was your week? So, we had a preview of Princess Mononoke last week. Did everyone watch Princess Mononoke? So this week I'm gonna talk with the assumption that everybody has watched it. So I really hope you have. Well, it's kind of late to say, but I watched it? Oh, thank you very much. That's good, that's good. So today is going to be the second half of the talk about Princess Mononoke, and we will discuss more about the actual story. Let me just go over what's gonna happen tonight very briefly. In the first half, we will talk about who Lady Eboshi truly is, then Iron Town and Great Cultural Revolution. Lastly, we will talk about the secret of Moro, a Japanese wolf. In the upcoming limited broadcast, I will talk about the relationship between Godzilla and Seven Samurai, the battle against Disney, a story about voice actors and the theme song, Mystery of Jigo, what the forest spirit really is, what it means for Hayao Miyazaki to make movies, and original sins and expulsion from paradise. I'm guessing what I will talk about in the second half will give more pressure on your brain. I will talk about the stories of the anime in the first half, while the second half will cover more inside stories, and at last I will put everything together and discuss what this anime really was, which will allow us to approach the true nature of this work. Okay, first of all, let's talk about who Lady Eboshi really is. The settings of Lady Eboshi is written in this book, a book called Princess Mononoke: How the Film Was Conceived. It's written inside this book, and this is actually... the book is like a summary of the documentary show of the same title produced by Nihon TV. The documentary is also on DVD. There, you see storyboards and manuscripts on Miyazaki's desk, but also numerous memos pasted around the desk. And because those memos are so interesting, the shooting crew tries to record them one after another. And one of the memos mentioned the settings of Eboshi, a woman who escaped from a pungent and hard past. She's sold to a foreign country and becomes a wife of a Wako pirate chief. Wako, which is the opposite of Genko, were Japanese pirates who attacked Chinese and Korean coasts. Well, some history books say they're not really Japanese but Chinese or Korean people who pretended to be Japanese. But anyway, they were called Wako. But anyway, she becomes a wife of one of their chiefs, and she gradually starts showing her leaderships, kills her husband, steals valuables, and brings them back home. And when she comes back, she obtains Ishibiya, which is the newest weapon from Ming or later China, and brings it into Japan. And those are the settings of Lady Eboshi. The important point is that she's once an unfortunate woman who is sold abroad. However, she steps up by becoming a wife of Wako leader. It means not only she's beautiful, but she's also a real go-getter. She's an unbelievable woman who climbs her ladder of success, finally kills her chief of pirates, steals money from Wako, plus steals China's latest cannon Ishibiya and brings it back to Japan. And she's planning to leave the rule of samurai and make a country of mighty ideals. The forest of the forest spirit draws her attention because it belongs to no one, which suits her need. During that time, most of the lands were owned by either the emperor, samurais, or Buddhist temples. But this forest belonged to the forest spirit. The memo says, if I obtain this forest, I can make my own country. If you read this much, doesn't Eboshi start looking like a person of justice? Indeed, she does many good things in the movie, like adopting women who have been sold, or caring for those who have been discriminated because of their Hansen disease, and even giving them jobs. So she does look like a nice person, but she's full of contradiction which keeps her away from being just a good person. For example, what I noticed first was the fact that there are no children in Iron Town. Do you remember how in Miyazaki's films, there are many villages such as the Valley of the Wind in Nausicaa or the Slug Valley in Castle in the Sky? There you can always see kids running around outside. However, there is no kid running around in Iron Town. Not only that, there is not a single baby held by their mothers. About this, Miyazaki himself explained in the pamphlet of Princess Mononoke. Oh, I just didn't have time to draw them. But speaking of not having time, he must have been a lot busier when he was making Castle in the Sky or Nausicaa. There's a reason for not depicting children. It's because Irontown is a settlement. Settlements were villages that existed in 18th and 19th century in the pioneer days in America, they became villages only 5 or 10 years ago during the pioneer days and were always in combat with the surroundings. Irontown accepts those who have lost their families or women who have been sold by their parents, but they can't afford to accommodate children and elders who couldn't work. There is not enough food in the first place, and since it's settlement, they can't feed anyone who can't work. In the outskirts of Irontown is an area where people with Hansen disease live in isolation. They are kept there because they have an ability to make ishibiya. Thus, it's relatively harsh environment for weak people. But considering that some of the people living in Irontown are married, shouldn't there also be children? But I assume that there's also a very strict rule on birth control that says they can't have any children. I think Eboshi intentionally creates this dominant culture in Irontown where women make fun of men and say they are stronger for the same reason. She's being very careful not to let the population increase without a plan until the village becomes bigger and the quality of life improves or the lives of the people become easier. And so, this is the first discrepancy of why Lady Eboshi doesn't look like a nice person. Another thing that concerned me was her cold attitudes. Eboshi makes her first appearance at a scene where she returns home with Irontown's cowherds after buying rice. Cowherd was an occupation for hinin or outcasts of ancient Japan that set hierarchy in the order of samurais, farmers, craftsmen, and merchants, eta and hinin, although some say this hierarchical order is actually a creation in Meiji era. But so you see how the cowherds are pulling the cows to carry straw rice bags on them. If you think about it, this village is quite rich. It's actually pretty amazing how everyone in the village eats rice. But anyway, during this trip, where they were coming back from buying rice, the caravan gets attacked by Japanese wolves. The attack leads into a battle, and Moro, the leader of the Japanese wolves, he gets shot by Eboshi's ishibiya, gets injured, and falls off the cliff. And when that happens, how should I call them? Colleagues, followers, the cows, and the cowherds also fall to the bottoms of the cliff, and there are many of them. And when that happens, this man Gonza, who is standing next to Eboshi, and he apparently has been a subordinate of Eboshi since she was a wife of the Wako pirate. So Gonza asks her, what shall we do? But Eboshi just says, we will depart soon. When Gonza asks, what about the men who were pushed over the cliff? She intentionally ignores it and gives an order to the caravan, reorganize the line. But some of those who fell off are still alive, or at least there is a chance. This indicates the severe fact that Irontown cannot afford to take care of those who may survive, but may become handicapped and lose abilities to work. That's why Eboshi leaves them to die without hesitation. On the other hand, Eboshi is extremely careful not to let anyone realize that she is actually a cold, hard-headed person. That's why when Koroku, one of the cowherds who fell off the cliff, was saved by Ashitaka and brought back to the village, Eboshi overreacted and said, "Koroku, I'm happy you're back and I apologize," as if to say she remembers the name of all ox drivers. But even though she seems apologetic in this scene, she will probably abandon him without any hesitation if they encounter the same situation. On top of that, during the climax scene where they hunt the forest spirit, she attracts the wild boars to a location where she hides bombs underground to kill them at once. As you can see the huge explosion here. This is Gonza and Eboshi who are looking down at the scene of bombing. See how we can't see their eyes? And this is their tactic to bond the wild boars by attracting them to a mined field. When they do that, they deploy their, their subordinates, like the cowherds near there. As they bombed the boars who charged toward the minefield, those people also received the explosion, and the huge dead bodies of the boars fall on top of them, which pretty much kill all of them. Later, there's a very tragic scene where Ashitaka finds one of the survivors covering his face, crying, while the dead bodies in heaps surround him. Just like that, Eboshi does not hesitate to sacrifice her subordinates as a bait as one of her options. That's how she can stay cool and objective when something like that actually happens. So, we can say that there are two sides to who she is. She can definitely be a good leader who is extremely intelligent and kind, but at the same time she can be a cold leader who doesn't mind sacrificing her own people to fulfill her purposes. She's portrayed as a person who obtains these two sides. I think Eboshi has a model. I think it's this person, Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong was a leader with enormous charisma and thorough rationality, who relentlessly pursued cultural revolution that was filled with destructions and slaughters, but at the same time made endless efforts to improve the lives of the farmers. And the reason why he's the model of Eboshi is because Mao was someone who declared, in 15 years, China will overtake the United Kingdom, who was the world leader in steel industry at the time. To do that, Mao tried to make an iron town or steel mill in every Chinese village and teach the farmers steel making. By doing so, Mao attempted to improve the productivity of iron in China drastically. Well, although the end result was a huge failure. I think Miyazaki took such history of Mao into account and portrayed the community of Iron Town in Princess Mononoke as a kind of communist utopia. Miyazaki spent all his youth, from his late teenage to early 30s, longing for communism. Of course, the brutality and the problems of Mao Zedong and the organization and guidance department of the Communist Party of China have been fully revealed by now. However, Miyazaki, as a so-called old leftist, thinks that he's not a superficial man who would easily turn his back on something he has once believed and go, well, communism was a mistake, the Communist Party of China was wrong. He rather thinks that if communism was a mistake, it's more important that he inspects why did such mistake happen inside of me, and he would cling on to the issue until the inspection ends. So, my theory is that the image of Eboshi is inspired by Mao Zedong in his youth, but she was depicted as a woman of great beauty. So again, Eboshi is sold by a slave dealer, becomes a wife of a Wako pirate, but later kills the leader, steals an advanced technology from Ming and tries to make an independent country in Japan. In other words, she's a revolutionist as well as a terrorist. For her, both kings and gods are nothing but obstacles. Mao Zedong himself said religion is an opium, and denied religion or even the existence of a god. Likewise to Eboshi, the forest spirit is nothing more than a giant creature, and even though the imperial family claims we come of a family of the gods, they are mere politicians. I believe Eboshi thinks we need neither for my ideal country. In my country, everyone is equal, and our lives will be put together rationally. Not only that, she's armed with a thoroughly logical mind. I'm not gonna deal with such superstitious nonsense. She's also literally armed, so she's a real terrorist. And I see this theory time to time on the internet. I also question, isn't Eboshi and Sun mother and daughter? Well, people who write something similar on the internet all say, although there's no evidence, and I don't have any proof either, because Miyazaki himself has never mentioned any of that. In fact, I thought maybe Suzuki-san has said something carelessly since he's chit-chatty. So I looked up most of his remarks, but I couldn't find a single word of evidence. However, although there's no evidence, there are things that are unnatural. If you see the settings of Sun's upbringing, it only says she was abandoned as a scapegoat by a human who has offended the forest. That's all there is for the official setting. As I said a little while ago, even a side character like Eboshi has a setting like she's sold to a foreign country and so on, or Jigo and so many other characters have tons of settings, but somehow Sun is the only one who has just one line description about who she is. It's too insufficient and unnatural. Moreover, there are many recollection scenes during the movie, but there is none that depicts Sun as a baby. So I can't help but to think that there must be a reason that only Sun has such brief setting. And if Sun is Eboshi's daughter, if Princess Mononoke was her daughter, then many things can be explained. For example, if Eboshi has a child with the Wako pirate, she must not love the child very much, considering the fact that she becomes his wife and eventually kills him. Well, you might say, no, she's a woman, she must love her own child, but no, Eboshi's not a regular woman. She's a female version of Mao Zedong. If we see her as Mao Zedong, we can also think that she feels a bit differently than other ordinary women. And of course, there is no child in Irontown. As I said before, I think this is because of the strict birth control. If Eboshi made all villagers know that their leader abandoned or lost her own precious child, it's easier for me to understand and everything makes sense clearly why everyone in the village is convinced by the rule that they can't make a child. It also gets easier to understand that Moro, the foster parent, and Eboshi, the true parent, hate each other so strongly if we think Eboshi and Sun are a mother-daughter relationship. I mean, in the first half, Moro is shot and injured by Eboshi, but until then, there should be no reason for Moro to have a strong personal grudge against Eboshi. However, both of them have that much grudge against each other by name. Moro is saying that the fight is not over until I bite Eboshi to death. So no matter how you look at it, it's a personal grudge against Eboshi. As for Eboshi, it appears as a precise symbol of her own guilt that a Japanese wolf called Moro is raising her own child that she abandoned. Every time she sees her daughter, who was raised by a Japanese dog, no matter how much she thought that Sun is no longer her child, she can't help feeling guilty. I've always wondered if the red pattern on Sun's face in a tattoo, who put it in for what purpose? One interpretation is to think when Sun grew up, she put it in by herself as a sign of determination that she was no longer a human being, so would never shed tears again. I also kind of think, actually, it may have been put in by whoever abandoned her to indicate that she was no longer a human. Anyway, the emotions between Moro and Eboshi can be explained well. What should I say? If we focus on the mother and daughter relationship between Sun and Eboshi. And let me show you. In the first half of the movie, there is a scene where Lady Eboshi talks to Ashitaka on a rooftop of Irontown in a nice atmosphere. Eboshi says, "Stay here, Ashitaka, and help me kill the forest spirit." So she tries to persuade him to stay and work in Irontown. Then she continues, "If the ancient gods disappear and the light enters into the forest, this place will be a rich land and Princess Mononoke will become human again." In other words, Eboshi thinks Sun or Princess Mononoke hates Eboshi because Moro taught her to hate her. That's why she's actually thinking, if I kill Moro and wipe out all the wolves, Sun will come back to human world. And in the following scene where Sun comes into Irontown alone to assassinate Eboshi, she in fact does not fight Sun seriously. Although Eboshi is clearly superior to Sun in martial arts and sword fight, she does not try to finish Sun, but instead she makes her subordinates surround her with spears to block her way out. She fights like a cat bullying a mouse without killing it. The reason for this is because Eboshi is waiting for Sun to run out of energy and fall down so she can catch her alive. But on the surface, she gives Sun, "I'm going to kill you" look when she fights. She's actually a lot stronger than Sun, but she doesn't deal with her seriously. And Moro, a Japanese wolf, hates Eboshi deeply, but even she seems to want Sun to return to the human world. This is a scene where Moro and Sun part. And when Sun leaves Moro saying, "I'm going to be the eyes for Okoto," she hugs Moro and acts like a child in front of her mom for the first time. Then Moro opens her eyes with long eyelashes and looks at her. The scene makes us realize, oh, she was a sexy wolf. It's also a scene where Jigo and Eboshi finally begin hunting the forest spirit, and Sun makes the final farewell to her mother and follow Okoto. They both know that they will never see each other again. Here, Moro says, "You have a way to live with that young man." Well, the real voice is a little bit more high-pitched. But when Ashitaka says earlier, "I will live with Sun, she's a human," Moro mocks Ashitaka insanely and says, like this, "How will you live with her?" In other words, Moro is someone who doesn't speak her mind. It's been consistent through the movie that she almost never says what's in her mind. When she's reunited with Okoto, the god of the wild boars, who was her lover before, she only says, "Okoto, finally a boar who will listen to reason." Or, "You can't even speak, can you?" As you can see, she never says what's truly in her mind. This is one incident that you can see in this video where a singer, Akihiro Miwa, voiced Moro, and you can see this in the video. At first, Miwa was acting normally without realizing the complex emotion Moro had toward Okoto. But when he said, "Okoto, finally a boar who will listen to reason," Miyazaki, who heard it, couldn't hold his patience, so he dashed out of the adjustment booth, ran up to Miwa and said, and then he said, "You see, Moro was actually in a relationship with Okoto." Miwa heard it and said, "What? A wolf and a wild boar?" Then Miyazaki said, "Yes, the wolf and the wild boar were in a relationship." Then Miwa was deeply convinced and said, "Oh, now I see." And in the next recording, he changed his tone of voice a little bit. He just added a slight nuance to his lines, such as, "You can't even speak, can you?" which now sounded like a woman describing a man who used to be in love relationship with her in the old days and feeling pitiful toward herself for liking such a man. Or a line, "Okoto, finally a boar who will listen to reason," which sounded like a high school girl who saw her boyfriend and told her friend, "Oh, here comes that idiot." Then write it down in the storyboard. But he just doesn't. That Moro and Okoto were in a love relationship. I mean, really, if you think about it, if Miyazaki did not tell the setting to Miwa during the voice recording, and if the TV crew of Nihon TV did not shoot that moment by chance, then nobody would have found it out. This guy does this kind of thing so often. So why does he do that? Let's talk about Miyazaki's unique way of playwriting and the essence of treating his characters in the second half tonight, and I will discuss some reasons. While Moro says to Ashitaka, "How will you live with her?" she's actually thinking that she can let Sun return to the human world. But to do so, the biggest premise is to kill Eboshi. And, well, Moro can't let Sun return to the world where Eboshi exists. It's because Lady Eboshi is a destroyer of the forest and is especially vicious among humans. So, in other words, the two women, Moro and Eboshi, are both trying to save Sun. On the other hand, Eboshi is thinking, if we kill the Japanese wolves and kill the forest spirit, the light will enter into the forest. In another word, if the forest becomes civilized, part of human society and a part of mere natural resource, Princess Mononoke, who I have once abandoned, will be able to return to the human world. This movie is very easy to understand if you think of it as a story of two mothers who are trying to save their daughter, pulling her from both sides. Because Moro and Eboshi say exactly the same lines to Ashitaka. As I said earlier, Moro mocks Ashitaka by saying, "How are you going to live with her? Are you going to fight humans with her?" Eboshi also says the exact same line to Ashitaka, who comes to tell her that Iron Town is under attack. Take a look at this. In this scene, Eboshi interrogates Ashitaka. You want me to stop killing the forest spirit and kill the samurai instead? In the exact same composition as when Moro mocks Ashitaka. It cannot be a coincidence that the two characters say something of the same meaning in a left-right symmetry. If you see it in a playwriter's point of view, there's no way this happens without any intention. The two of them are questioning Ashitaka. How do you want me to live? What do you want me to do about her? You want me to stop killing the forest spirit and kill the samurai instead? Or are you saying that you'll fight humans? They're depicted in a complete right-left symmetry while they speak to the same character, Ashitaka. It means that the two mothers are asking about their daughter's life to a man who will become her husband. And there are also rhetorical questions. Knowing Ashitaka won't say yes, they ask him, is that what you want? In other words, they're being a scary mom going, how serious are you about my daughter? While they both mock him in the same tone. So they mock and return the same lines to Ashitaka. Because the two are in the same position, which is being a mother as well as a tribal leader. These are what I was thinking before I came to think, oh, isn't Eboshi's son's real mother? Just like I said earlier, there's no evidence, but nothing contradicts if we think like that, and it wouldn't be strange if Miyazaki had that kind of hidden settings, considering the fact that he wasn't going to make the movie without telling anyone about such an important setting on how Okoto and Moro used to be in a relationship. However, both Moro and Eboshi try not to let Sun notice that Sun's real mother is Eboshi. But both mothers believe that if they don't kill the other one, then there's no future for Sun, and that's how they fight each other. And next, it is about the secret of Moro. Now we only have about 20 minutes left. This is a scene that comes out about an hour past in the movie. Wounded Ashitaka wakes up in Moro's roost and goes outside. Then Moro, who was sitting on top of the roost, speaks to him. In this scene, you can see where Moro lives, but it's a bit special for somewhere a mere wolf lives. This is a scene where Ashitaka gets up and stands inside Moro's roost. Moro's roost is all made of rocks. Not just that, the floor, the ceiling, and the walls are made of huge monoliths. Looking at from the outside, you can see how Moro is on top of the ceiling. And you see how the floor and the ceiling are horizontal. Moreover, the side walls lean in the same angle. And they're like from both sides. And they're both shaped in this angle, leaning inwards. And now look here. This is the scene where Ashitaka leaves the next morning. Here, you can see the entire roost made of these mysterious rocks. As you can see, perfect horizontal monolith is on the top. The rocks on the both sides support it, and the floor part sticks out. And if you see the last panel I showed you, this is a view from the side. It's sticking out to form a terrace. I think I saw one with the exact same shape as this somewhere. The answer is in Osaka. It's in Katano City in Osaka, inside a shrine called Iwafune Shrine, and it's called Amano Iwato. And it pretty much has the same structure. I don't mean to say Sun and others lived in Osaka. What I mean is that this is the ruin of a megalithic civilization. As I mentioned last week, the village Ashitaka lived in originally also had giant rock worship. It's a type of religion which even Aomori has only a few remaining ruins of. That's where Ashitaka departed from. In considering that Jomon people enshrined such a huge rock as a sacred body, there's a connection. In other words, Ashitaka's village is the descendant of such megalithic civilization. In comparison, there's no explanation about Moro's roost in the movie, but you know for sure that it is not created by nature if you look at a cave with such horizontal floor and ceiling, or the rocks of the same exact size supporting both sides of a horizontal roof on the top. If you think normally, this must be a temple of a megalithic civilization or an Iwakura, a seat of God. This is an Amano Iwato in Iwafune Shrine in Katano City, Osaka. The structure of Stonehenge in the UK is pretty much the same as this. The builders tried to create a seat of gods by placing rocks horizontally or other rocks that stood vertically at the same angle. This is a feature of megalithic civilization. In other words, Moro's roost is actually an ancient temple. And, well, what should I say? During the age of ancient megalithic civilization, true gods lived in Japan. A family of Moro and other beings were revered by ancient people because they were huge beasts and were able to speak the human language. Therefore, they were true gods. That's why people made a temple and enshrined them there. However, to Moro's temple, to his temple, now no one visits and worships. This is what the forest is dying truly means. So, nevertheless, Moro still lives here. The reason is because Moro is the god of dogs. Dogs are the oldest and most faithful friends of mankind. And because he's the god of dogs, he stays in a temple where no one ever visits anymore, still waiting for someone to come back. When I found this out, I was like, oh my god! And seriously, I almost bursted in tears while watching the Friday Roadshow. There's no way Moro hates people because he continues to live in a temple that people have forgotten about. That's why she raises baby Sun. She raises an abandoned human baby as her daughter, so she rather likes humans. She just hates human acts. She just can't forgive Eboshi for abandoning Sun. So it's not like Moro hates humans. However, ordinary commentary books or even Ghibli's official books say Moro hates humans. So please don't trust the lines in Princess Mononoke. You should just trust the images. It's easier to understand if you trust the images rather than the lines. The reason why the forest dies is because no one comes to the place which is once called a shrine in praise there. Because no one believes in gods of forest anymore, and now they see forest as mere natural resource. Those gods of forest gradually become smaller. Moro is 300 years old and Okoto is 500 years old, so the times when they were born are the times when rice farming and iron were introduced to Japan from China, and people stopped believing in such stories that there are gods in the forest. So perhaps neither Okoto nor Moro know accurately about the times when people were worshipping them as gods. I guess they have been told from their families what it was like in the past. So the wild boar gods, including Okoto, can no longer trust humans and decide to make it to Aomori, where the megalithic civilization that still worships the forest gods barely remain. On the other hand, Moro says on the surface, humans will never worship us again, and 50% of him actually believes in his own words, but he still lives in the megalithic shrine that human once made for him. To me, this is such a touchy story. Now, the megalithic civilization that believes in the gods of the forest only remains at the very end of Aomori. That's why Okoto and other wild boars have moved from Kyushu region, which is called Chinza in the movie. By the way, Okayama Prefecture is said to be the stage for Princess Mononoke. Miyazaki went to sketch Okayama and said, let's make this place the stage of the movie. This backs up the theory that the movie was staged in Okayama. I support this theory too. It's because if the story was based in somewhere east of Kyoto, it'll mean that the horde of wild boars would have cut through Kyoto, but that would be impossible. The mission that Jigo receives from the emperor is, of course, to bring back the head of the forest spirit, which is believed to hold the power of immortality. But more than that, there could be an order to stop the hordes of wild boar gods in Okayama, where the front line is, before they rush into Kyoto. When I think like that way, everything makes sense sense. Because if a crowd of huge wild boars has crossed Kyoto, the imperial family would have been completely crushed since their authority has fallen entirely during the Muromachi period, as Miyazaki explained. During that time, they made living by selling their own autographs. Well, so I think this is the large flow of the plot in Princess Mononoke. Rather than paying attention to Moro's line that says, like, I can't forgive human beings, we should look at the part that Moro saves a human baby who she has no connection to, or can just bite her to death and raises her with care. Or on top of that, she wants to return her beloved son to the human world one day and has a high hope that Ashitaka can be a help for that purpose. When Ashitaka is sleeping in the roost, suffering from the wounds, Moro is on top of the roof the whole time. When Ashitaka wakes up, Moro says to him, I was hoping you'd cry out in your sleep. Then I would have bitten your head off to silence you. What this means is that Ashitaka's right arm is cursed, but Moro is also dying from the iron bullet shot by Eboshi. Both are in the exact same situation. It's even more painful because they are both holding themselves back from turning into Tatari gods. If they turn their pain into grudges against each other, they could become Tatari god easily, which would ease them. However, although he's in so much pain, Ashitaka endures it desperately without turning it into a grudge. When Moro sees such a man like Ashitaka, she thinks, well, I might as well die here alone, instead of turning this pain into Tatari God. Well, she also thinks, only after I crush Eboshi's head into pieces. So, Moro must see Ashitaka conquer negative emotions and decide that he is a man who she can leave her precious daughter to. However, Miyazaki describes none of that in the movie. Instead, he makes Moro say all the scary lines so she looks like a very scary old woman. However, the real role of Moro in the movie is so important as she observes various people objectively. That's why Akihiro Miwa was so happy hearing all the stories about Moro and said, wow, that's Moro? And he was so happy, but he said, but you didn't write that in the script. And Miyazaki was like, no, I didn't. And he sounded so happy. You can see all that in the documentary. Well, the first half ends around here, and in the second half, finally, I want to get to the heart of the story. Okay, time for the questionnaire. I think Princess Mononoke is deeper than everyone thinks. But while for those who are watching it without analyzing, it's totally normal that you don't understand its depth. People who only watch TV only follow spoken lines, but in this anime, no one, including Ashitaka, Sun, Eboshi, Moro, obviously and even Jigo speaks their mind, which makes the movie's structure so complex. Before those who are watching the first half go, I want to tell you that you can enjoy this movie a lot if you think deeply by paying attention to many things instead of just listening to the meanings of the spoken lines. In the second half, I'm going to go into the core of the story or secret stories. Now, let me see the result of the questionnaire. Oh nice, there's only 1% of little unsatisfied and unsatisfied altogether. Thank you very much. So, coming up next is a limited broadcast. The resume is longer for the second half, so I'm guessing that it's going to be tougher, but I'm going to go over Godzilla and Seven Samurai. Next week, I will finally feature Porco Rosso. Porco Rosso is also not such a simple movie. You know the famous catchphrase, this is what's cool. Now the actual story has nothing to do with that. About Porco Rosso, I'm going to talk about what was Italy like back then, what kind of country Italy is in the first place, and what's airplane. Porco Rosso is such a well-made airplane movie, but if you don't start from discussing how airplanes fly in the first place, then you won't be able to appreciate the real joy of watching this movie. This kind of story can be troublesome, and I know it can be painful for you to listen to me talk for so long. But to enjoy something properly, you should study a little, and I will try my best to entertain you, so please keep up with me. Now, please switch to the limited broadcast.
Thank you for watching until the end. I am the most famous Otaku King in Japan, Otaking Toshio Okada. I started planning to talk overseas about animations and movies popular in Japan in English. Before long, I'm planning to add English subtitles to movie talking in Japanese, so please look forward to it. If you ask a question in this comment field of this video, maybe I will talk about comments as a theme. We welcome the people who are interested in the forefront of Japanese otaku culture, and those who want to hear stories of interesting animations and movies. So please subscribe our channel. If there is good relation, I will get better and I will do my best. Thanks.